Yo peeps, Sdafhaa here, and today I'm gonna be doing a recap and review of what happened in MPL Malaysia Season 13 Week 1. On day 1, the day started with Homebois versus the Selangor Red Giants, where in Game 1, Selangor Red Giants brought out a surprise by literally starting the season with a Roger pickup on their new gold laner, Innocent. At first, Homebois were very aggressive with their gameplay, finding some ganks here and there and basically trying to invade against the Selangor Red Giants, but the Red Giants bounced back very hard, with Innocent starting to rack up kills left and right on the Roger. It basically looked like he was starving, and everyone on the side of the Homebois was just a piece of meat for the wolf to start biting into. Eventually, Innocent got so fed that the Homebois were not really able to respond to it overall, especially considering that they also had Joy and Barats to deal with on the side. Their team comp just wasn't made for it, and Innocent with a 14-1 KDA, I think by the end of the game, just became way too big of a snowball for the Homebois to handle. In the second game, Red Giants basically took the momentum they had in game number 1 and went hyper aggro from the very start. They had drafted a pretty strong team fight composition, so they basically just went out the door running and shut down Homebois completely right from the start of the game. Like, I believe the final score was 10-0. So there was no way for Homebois to fight back at all. And this is a big surprise because Homebois are the defending champions. I think a lot of us had high expectations for them going into this, so to see them getting clean swept in game number 1, I think is less of an indication of the weakness of the Homebois and more proof of how much growth the Selangor Red Giants have been through, which I love. They're all very young players, so the fact that they've been growing every single season is amazing to see. The second match of the day was then Team Hak and Bounty Esports. Team Hak has a new lineup, Bounty Esports is a new team but with some familiar faces. And in game 1, Bounty started by being very aggro to try and get snowballs by farming kills on Yuna's Martis. They did definitely overextend quite a few times, and at first it started out pretty well for them. But once you got to around the mid-game phase, you could see how they were kind of trading a bit too evenly and not even getting much back from it. And because Panda still kind of has a bad habit of going a bit too far, especially when his team is ahead, Noir was often able to find pickoffs on the Bounty Esports gold laner, and that allowed Team Hak to make the comeback in the end. In game number 2, Team Hak were very smart with the way they drafted. They grabbed the Fanny as a last pick when there was no way for Bounty Esports to grab any reliable CC anymore, because this last pick on the red side, you can't counter pick that. Because of that, Team Hak were even more aggro, and they were ganking right from the beginning with Janus on this Fanny, and his skills were pretty strong. Like, he had really fast fingers, he was jumping in, he was getting kills, he was getting out. There were like 2 instances where he got very close to being picked off. Unfortunately, Bounty Esports weren't quite able to finish him off either time, so they ended up getting shut down quite hard because the snowball from Team Hak was a little bit too much at that point. On day 1, the performance from Homebois was a little bit disappointing, but I was really surprised by the Red Giants overall. And Bounty Esports put up a pretty strong showing overall, with Team Hak appearing a little bit shaky from time to time, but still seeing some of that potential overall. Pretty much a good start to the season that we were looking forward to. Then, on day 2, we started off with Todak versus Barracuda Esports. Barracuda started very aggro actually. I noticed a lot of the newer teams this season are very aggressive early game teams. They were very confident, their players basically controlled the game up until the mid phase and then they ended up in a similar situation to Bounty on day 1, where they would overextend quite a few times in their fights and get punished. Todak, although they were getting pressured early on, bided their time, took advantage of too many trades and ended up winning game 1. In game 2, I personally was not a big fan of the Tigreal last pick coming out from Todak's side, because Barracuda already had Barats, Ruby, Nana, Tamas, basically a lot of heroes that had ways of cancelling the implosion or getting away from the implosion. And because of this, Todak weren't quite able to get any catches on the side of Barracuda, and not only that, they didn't really have a lot of damage with the team composition they had. So Barracuda basically just ran at them, fought into them every single time, and came out on top most fights, which allowed them to tie up the series. In game 3, Todak brought out a Mincetar Gourd combo, which was very interesting. Barracuda were still very aggressive, which I liked. They tried to take that momentum and win another game with it. They did get quite a few kills at first, but then they underestimated Todak, went too far, and their entire team got caught together in a King's Calling Mystic Gush combo, which destroyed them, team wiped them. And although Barracuda tried to regain the momentum, they weren't able to, and Todak closed out the series. Todak, I think, still a little bit shaky here and there, but we can see the improvement, and I have a bias for Zion Senpoi as a player, so I love the shot calls that he's making for the team. Barracuda as a team seems to have some potential, but they got some work to do. RSG versus Monster Vicious was the second match of day 2, where RSG started in signature style, very aggressive with strong and frequent roams in the early game. Storm, especially on the Minotaur, kept catching people with the Minuan Fury, and because they had such a strong team fight with Izanami on Faramis and then Kaiser on Yuzong, there was no way for Monster Vicious to really win team fights after they lost that early game, so RSG secured game number 1. In game number 2, Monster Vicious brought out a very interesting meta of CC Gold Lane and Granger Jungle. And while RSG did start strong, the CC Gold Lane matchup versus carry actually worked out pretty well to get that early lane advantage. So even though initially they got a lot of catches with Storm on the Kaja, Nova X Kovar's Minotaur started counter-engaging, and Subway played very safe. I'm honestly impressed with how well he played that Granger, because he's normally known for tank utility junglers. Like, there was no way for RSG to actually jump on top of him because of the counter-engage from the rest of his team. And with the way that things were going, Monster Vicious started reading Storm's engagements. They caught him off guard with a really nice setup from Faker's Terrify, and they won game 2. I always love it when teams are able to win games with like interesting metas like this. Double fighter, side lane, gold, marksman jungle is very fun to watch. I hope to see more of that. Unfortunately for Monster Vicious, in game number 3, they kinda got hit with the curse of the Arlet Claude. Still 0% win rate on both heroes so far. It was a slow early game from both teams where Monster Vicious kinda held out, but then RSG had a really strong teamfight composition again with Minotaur, Nana, Barats, Nolan. The thing is, this game went very long because both teams made a lot of mistakes, with like important members getting caught when they really didn't need to. But MV ended up kind of throwing the game away because they took a fight in the mid lane that they had already started losing, and they tried to force it, which allowed RSG to take full advantage and close out the series to get the win. And then for game number 3 of day 2, we had Niners versus King Empire, where in game 1, King Empire basically lost the game because they disrespected Niners in the draft and gave Barbosa his signature Matilda. Like, although they wanted to try and fight into it, was way too much. Like, Niners had a very good game plan going into this game because they shut down Smooth on the Yuzong first, realizing that without him, King Empire doesn't have a lot of team fight, especially to deal with the Matilda. They could just go in, go out very easily. They could dive under towers very confidently with the Matilda, and Yetri on the X-Borg was doing a great job as well. So because of that, Niners took game number 1. However, in game number 2, Niners were the ones to make a mistake in the draft because they let Smooth Benedetta through. And we know what a monster Smooth is on this Benedetta. He basically got super incredibly fed right from the beginning, even though Yetri tried the match on the Paquito. While Niners were trying to play for teamfights, Yetri fell behind, so he couldn't really match in terms of macro and split push against Smooth, and then King Empire just basically dumpstered the game from there on. The Benedetta carried them all the way. In game number 3, Niners brought a very interesting Novaria Selena combo, which basically when you draft a combo like this, you really have to be active from the early game, scouting with Astral Echo and getting kills with the Abyssal Arrow. Unfortunately, Niners could not do that because King Empire had too tanky a front line, right? I believe they had Grok, Baxia, X-Borg. So King Empire were completely dominating the game from the beginning until like the 18-minute mark. And then they made a mistake and allowed Sasa to get sniped off. And then some god defense plays from Barbosa as well as Detto kept the game going for another 20 minutes. A 38-minute game because both sides kept making mistakes. Even the Niners, like Zavs, got caught out probably a few times too many, which allowed King Empire, despite kind of throwing the early game away, to eventually close out the game and get the victory. But this match was not fun to cast. It was fun for y'all to watch. It was not fun to cast. Don't do that, teams, please. On day number 3, the first match started off with Team Hack versus Selangor Red Giants. They started off interestingly again with Janice from Team Hack picking up the Sylvana tank jungle. And although Team Hack started very strong, in fact, by constantly getting pickoffs with the Sylvana, with the Cho, Red Giants had a bit of a stronger team fight, and their coordination was so clean. Like, we saw it in day 1, we kept seeing it in day 3. They took over the game. They didn't allow Team Hack a chance to make a comeback at all. And with Minotaur, Baxia, and Xborg, it was probably too hard of a matchup once it got to that mid game. You can't really get pickoffs easily against them anymore. In game 2, Selangor Red Giants brought Edith and Dirov. And when you bring Dirov, you usually expect to win lane with him pretty hard, especially against a hero like Phoveus. The thing is, Cram was actually getting bullied in the EXP lane pretty hard. I already thought like, okay, this game is not going very well, this Dirov pick is not working. But the Red Giants were very smart with the way they adjusted, because Cram basically built for tank utility and as a secondary front line because he was already behind. And he left the carrying to the rest of the Selangor Red Giants. Yume's Edith was doing a lot of damage, Skies on the Nolan was doing some crazy damage with some good pincers. And while Iris tried to do his job on the Phoveus, like, they just got outplayed a little bit too much, and Selangor Red Giants got another clean sweep. In game number 2, RSG went up against King Empire. And in their first game, RSG was very smart with the draft by baiting out the Angela pick since they were on the red side, and then stealing all of the Angela combo heroes. They stole away Carrie, Baxia, Paquito, even the Guinevere. So basically everything that King Empire might have wanted to combo with a support hero, they didn't have access to. And then X-Win on the Grok got countered pretty hard by Stone playing on the Guinevere roam as well. Some good coordination from RSG, as well as Rippo coming in for his first game and just flexing on them by surviving fights and then cutting them off. RSG were able to win game 1 quite handedly. They basically didn't even allow Sutsujin to play the game at all because he's got bullied out of his jungle so hard on the Fredrin. However, he did get vengeance in game number 2 because Stone went on the Raph, and it was a good idea on paper to try and get them to like roam around the map more easily with the Baxia combo, but it allowed X-Win on the Grok to really bully Venogo, and this time it was RSG's jungler who basically didn't get to play the game at all. RSG tried to take their fights, but like, it was a little bit too much of a difference for them to make up at that point. And Smooth on the Xborg even went full damage, right, to counter the Raph, because normally Raph Holy Healing counters the Ice Queen's Wand build. So Smooth went Sea Halberd, he went Oracle, and the team fight just ended up being too much, allowing King Empire to get game number 2. In game number 3, Storm tried to deny Grok from X-Win because X-Win has basically been playing nothing but Grok since the start of the season. But his very first invade of the game, he overstayed and got punished. After that, RSG would try to team fight with Izanamis, Faramis, and Rippo on the Yu Zong. But King Empire would keep getting pickoffs with their Kaja roam pick, and Smooth on the Terizla made some really smart plays by jumping in off tempo, basically waiting for RSG to use all of their cooldowns before committing the penalty zone, and that allowed them to take control and win out the game and the series. Detto especially deserves a shout out because his Novaria gameplay was solid. They first picked it in both game 2 and game 3, and they won both games. And then lastly, the final game of the week. The final game of the week went to Barracuda Esports versus Monster Vicious, where Barracuda Esports went very aggro from the beginning because they had the Rafaela, Barat, and Tamas combo, not to mention that Hesu playing on Arlet was popping off. One of the better Arlet performances the entirety of week 1, catching multiple people with Final Slash. Unfortunately, even though they were leading, the momentum was reversed when Monster Vicious started gaining some ground and Faker stole the Lord with his Novaria sniping. And because of the way that their comp worked with Rafaela healing the entire team, they weren't really able to play macro around the map, which allowed Monster Vicious to apply pressure. This resulted in Barracuda starting to take back trades, and yeah, just not really playing out that late game very well. I feel like this is a weakness of Barracuda Esports that they really need to fix. In game number 2, Monster Vicious picked up the Benedetta for Xeno. and it was scary. Like, I was really surprised by how mechanically intensive he was able to play. He secured like the first turtle fight, the second turtle fight with some really clean combos and jumping in, stunning the enemy jungle. Hesu on the X-Borg couldn't really keep up, right? Like, he was already behind, and X-Borg obviously pushes way slower than Benedetta, doesn't have as much map presence. And not to mention, Grace on the Guinevere looked very uncomfortable overall. It does make one worry a little bit about his hero pool. Because of all these factors adding together, Barracuda Esports basically couldn't take team fights at all. King Empire just muscled their way in and won out the series in a clean sweep for themselves. At the end of MPL MY Season 13 Week 1, the standings of the regular season are as such. As you can see, Selangor Red Giants sitting very comfortably at the top, joined by King Empire Esports, Monster Vicious, RSG, Team Hack, Todak, all balancing around the center, and Niners, Barracuda, Bounty, and Homebois, surprisingly, sitting at the bottom of the charts. It's only been week 1. I understand that a lot of teams do generally take a little while when a new season starts to like find their groove, find their momentum, so it's understandable that some teams wouldn't really have performed, and I think there were a lot of mistakes that happened in multiple games. That's why day 2 ended up going so long. Homebois is probably the biggest surprise overall, but they did match up against a team I rated like right behind them in my previous predictions, so I think it's hard to really put down Homebois just yet, because I don't think they've gotten the chance to really show off their stuff. I like the aggressiveness of a lot of the new teams. I feel like Niners, Bounty, Barracuda are all very aggressive early game teams, and I like that confidence overall, but they gotta be able to back it up. Like, all of these teams have a little bit of difficulty closing out the game because they tend to get a little bit impatient. I think, unfortunately, week 1 performances by the teams are still a little bit underwhelming. I think I was expecting a little bit more from them overall, but again, it's only week 1. There's still 5 more weeks of the regular season. I think there's a lot of promise. There's actually a lot of teams, a lot of new lineups that actually do have potential, and I think once they're given a bit more time to refine their lineups, they have a very good shot once they go up into the international scene. I think especially now, a lot of us have hopes on the Selangor Red Giants. They are definitely already champion level at week 1, and if they continue growing, who knows where they could go. I am definitely rooting for all of these teams. I'm definitely hoping that the teams don't make me cast another 38-minute game. And yeah, looking forward to week number 2. Make sure you guys tune in. And if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you guys leave a like, a subscribe, so that you guys can catch up whenever I post something new. And do leave a comment below about what things you want to see, whether or not any of these matches or drafts you guys may want me to analyze. Yeah, I'm basically just trying to figure everything out. I'm still working on YouTube, working on social media actively for the first time, so do be gentle with me. And yeah, thank you very much everyone for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one.